If you were to stand at the edge of the Nile 5,000 years ago, you wouldn't see the majestic pyramids yet, nor hear the name of Tutankhamun or Ramses echo through history. You'd see a world on the brink of becoming legend. Before the pharaohs ruled, before the gods were immortalized in hieroglyphs, before even the first stone temple rose from the desert, there was chaos, curiosity, and invention. This is the story of how one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known was born from mud brick villages, shaped by shifting sands and powered by a river that refused to die. Stick around, because we're about to uncover the dramatic rise and fall and rise again of ancient Egypt, from its humble beginnings to its golden heights, and eventually its decline into shadow. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a saga of gods and kings, of blood and brilliance. Let's begin where it all started, not with a pharaoh, but with a farmer. The Predynastic period of Egypt, roughly from 6000 to 3100 BCE, is where this story begins. Egypt wasn't yet a unified land, nor a kingdom. It was a patchwork of small, independent communities that slowly learned to thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. As the Sahara dried and pushed people toward the life-giving banks of the Nile, early Egyptian settlers began farming, domesticating animals, and forming the first seeds of culture. They wove baskets, crafted pottery, and buried their dead in shallow graves, often curled into fetal positions. From these burials, archaeologists discovered that these people believed in some kind of afterlife, a hint of Egypt's later obsession with death and rebirth. These early communities split along the river into two main regions, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. Over time, villages evolved into proto-kingdoms like Naqada, Hierakonpolis, and Abydos, each with its own chieftain or proto-ruler. As these centers grew, so did their ambitions. Trade networks emerged, linking Egypt with Nubia, the Levant, and perhaps even Mesopotamia. Craftsmanship advanced. Pottery became more ornate, burial practices more elaborate. Symbolic motifs began to appear, the forerunners of hieroglyphs. And yet, despite the growing complexity, no one ruled all of Egypt. Not yet. By around 3200 BCE, tensions and ambitions began to reach a boiling point. Warfare between rival communities increased. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dominance. This turbulent, bloody road led directly into the early dynastic period, from about 3100 to 2686 BCE, when Egypt finally took its first unified breath as a kingdom. Legend and ancient records credit Narmer, also known as Menz, as the king who united Upper and Lower Egypt into one realm. The Narmer palette, a carved ceremonial artifact, shows the king wearing the crowns of both Upper and Lower Egypt, a powerful symbol of his dominion over the two lands. Whether Narmer truly achieved this unification or symbolized a process that took decades, his impact was monumental. He founded the first dynasty, and with it, the concept of kingship in Egypt was born. A divine office, a god-king ruling in the name of Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order. During the first and second dynasties, the capital was established at Memphis, strategically located where Upper and Lower Egypt met. Kings began developing administrative structures, recording events, and most crucially, developing a writing system. Hieroglyphs emerged not as literature, but as tools of power to inscribe a king's name, to document grain deliveries, to legitimize royal decrees. Religion began to formalize, and mortuary practices became more complex. Kings were no longer buried in simple pits, but in mastabas, rectangular tombs with underground chambers, the ancestors of the pyramids to come. The centralized power and innovations of the early dynastic period laid the foundation for the most iconic phase of Egyptian history, the Old Kingdom, from about 2686 to 2181 BCE. This was Egypt's first golden age, the age of the pyramids. Here, kings weren't just rulers, they were gods on earth. The Old Kingdom saw the rise of the 3rd through 6th dynasties, and with them came unprecedented advancements in architecture, administration, and ideology. At the forefront was Djoser, the first king of the 3rd dynasty, who commissioned the brilliant architect Imhotep to build a tomb unlike any before, the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a celestial stairway for a divine king, crafted from cut stone, a technological marvel. But it was in the 4th dynasty that pyramid building reached its awe-inspiring zenith. Under Sneferu, Egypt experimented with the bent pyramid and the red pyramid, perfecting the techniques that allowed his son, Khufu, to construct the Great Pyramid of Giza, a monument so precise and massive that even modern engineers are left in wonder. Alongside Khufu rose Khafre, builder of the 2nd pyramid and possibly the Great Sphinx, and Menkaure, with his own pyramid, completing the Giza complex. These colossal monuments weren't just tombs. They were statements of divine authority, eternal stability, and immense centralized power. They required tens of thousands of laborers, not slaves, but well-fed seasonal workers, organized with military precision. Bureaucracy flourished to manage resources, labor, and food. Religion became deeply entangled with governance. The sun god Ra rose in prominence, and the king became his earthly son. Yet, all golden ages fade. By the end of the 6th dynasty, central authority began to fracture. Long reigns, court intrigues, and powerful regional governors, called nomarchs, began to assert autonomy. The once mighty pharaoh became a distant figurehead, unable to control the growing chaos. Famine, perhaps linked to low Nile floods, and a potential climate crisis destabilized the kingdom. And thus, Egypt plunged into its first major dark age, the First Intermediate Period. For over a century, from around 2181 to 2055 BCE, Egypt was divided. Rival dynasties in Heracleopolis and Thebes vied for control. Tombs became smaller, art less refined, but in some ways this period was more democratic. Commoners were buried with texts like the coffin texts, previously reserved for royalty, showing a shift in religious thinking. Eventually, a family of Theban rulers reunited Egypt and ushered in the next chapter, the Middle Kingdom. From about 2055 to 1650 BCE, the Middle Kingdom represented a renaissance of culture, literature, and stability. Pharaohs of the 11th and 12th dynasties, such as Mentuhotep II and Senusret III, re-centralized power, crushed rebellious nomarchs, and launched campaigns into Nubia, securing gold, trade routes, and military prestige. They also turned their attention inward, reforming the bureaucracy, codifying laws, and patronizing the arts. This was the era of the Tale of Sinuhe, the Instruction of Amenemhat, and other masterpieces of Egyptian literature. Art became more expressive, and even tombs of officials showed greater individuality. Kings were now seen less as infallible gods and more as shepherds of the people, stern but just. However, like the Old Kingdom before it, the Middle Kingdom couldn't escape decline. Weakened by internal strife and perhaps overly ambitious building projects, it opened the door to foreign influence. In the Second Intermediate Period, from about 1650 to 1550 BCE, foreign rulers known as the Hyksos, likely from the Levant, seized control of northern Egypt. The Hyksos brought new technologies: the horse-drawn chariot, composite bows, and advanced fortifications. They ruled from Avaris and adopted Egyptian customs, gods, and even writing, but they remained outsiders. In the south, native Egyptian kings in Thebes prepared for a counterattack. One of them, Kamose, began the liberation, but it was his brother Ahmose who expelled the Hyksos, reunited the land, and founded the New Kingdom, Egypt's greatest age of empire. The New Kingdom, from about 1550 to 1077 BCE, was the apex of Egyptian power, wealth, and international prestige. It was the age of empire, of military might, and of the most famous pharaohs in history. The 18th dynasty produced Hatshepsut, a powerful queen who declared herself king and ruled as a pharaoh in her own right. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri still stands as a marvel of architecture and elegance. Then came Thutmose III, a military genius who expanded Egypt's borders to their greatest extent, stretching from modern-day Sudan to Syria. But it was during this dynasty that something truly strange happened. Amenhotep IV, later known as Akhenaten, launched a radical religious revolution. He abolished the old gods, particularly Amun, and elevated the sun disk Aten as the sole deity. He moved the capital to Akhetaten, modern Amarna, and created a unique, highly stylized artistic tradition. Akhenaten's reign disrupted the priesthood and confused the population, and his successor, a boy king named Tutankhaten, quickly reversed course. You know him today as Tutankhamun, famous not for his deeds, but for the incredible treasures in his nearly intact tomb. The 19th dynasty brought Seti the Reign and then Ramses II, known as Ramses the Great. He fought the mighty Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh, signed one of the first known peace treaties in history, and left behind a legacy carved into temples, statues, and obelisks across Egypt. He reigned for over 60 years and fathered over 100 children, a living god to his people. But even Ramses couldn't halt decline forever. As the 20th dynasty unfolded, corruption spread, tombs were looted, and Egypt's military overstretched. The Sea Peoples, mysterious invaders from the Mediterranean, clashed with Egypt in desperate battles. Ramses III, the last great pharaoh, managed to repel them, barely, but the cost was high. By the end of the New Kingdom, Egypt was a shadow of its former self, fractured, vulnerable, and drained. What followed were centuries of division, foreign rule, and decline. Yet the legacy of these eras, the monumental stonework, the divine kingship, the intricate religious beliefs, would endure for millennia. So when you gaze at a pyramid, remember, it's not just a tomb. It's a symbol of thousands of years of ambition, resilience, and imagination. From the scattered villages of the pre-dynastic Nile to the thundering armies of Ramses, Egypt's story is one of the most extraordinary in human history. We've only just scratched the surface.